He taught the world how to fight without fear. He showed millions what an unstoppable body looks like. And yet, the final image of Bruce Lee is not a punch, a kick, or a victory pose. It is silence, a closed room. A man who never lost a fight, suddenly unable to stand. This is the paradox that opens our case file. The strongest man of his generation did not fall in battle. He fell in stillness. July 20th, 1973. The headlines would later explode, but the moment itself was quiet. No cameras, no crowd, no warning bell. A body that had been trained to perfection stopped responding. For decades, the world argued about how it happened. Fewer people asked the more dangerous question: when did the countdown actually begin? Because stories like this do not start with death. They start with pressure, slow, invisible, and misunderstood. On screen, Bruce Lee looked invincible. His movements were sharp, his philosophy clear, his confidence absolute. Off-screen, the pace was relentless. Training, filming, choreography, writing, thinking, always forward, never slowing. To the public, this looked like discipline. To the body, it can look like debt. And debt always comes due. The myth told us he was beyond limits. The human reality tells a different story, one that was easy to miss because strength is often mistaken for safety. This is not a video about conspiracy or cheap mystery. This is a timeline, a reconstruction, an attempt to separate what we know, what was reported, and what remains unknown. Over the next chapters, we will trace the road from a troubled childhood to global icon status, then follow the pressure cooker that formed behind the image of perfection. We will slow down the final days, not to sensationalize them, but to understand them. Here is the open question that frames everything you are about to see. How does a man who mastered his body fail to hear it asking for help? And if the warning signs were there, why did almost no one, fans, media, even those closest, recognize them in time? The countdown did not begin in July 1973. It began much earlier. And once you see where it truly started, the ending will no longer feel sudden. It will feel inevitable.
3 names sit at the top of Korea's fame economy: Kim Soo-hyun, Lee Min-ho, and Song Joong-ki, actors whose fortunes are often reported in the 9-figure range, with estimates placing them around 120 maoris, 110 memor, and 95 maoris respectively. But this isn't just a story about money.
Violence was not a philosophy yet. It was a language he learned early. Each confrontation sharpened his reflexes, but it also planted a deeper fear. If he stopped improving, he would fall behind. Strength at this stage wasn't about mastery, it was about not being overwhelmed.
Because the richest actor isn't always the most talented. It's the one who survives the pressure test. The breakout that turns into a national obsession, the endorsement era that prints money, and then the public storm. Controversy, backlash, or a narrative that threatens to rewrite their legacy.
This created a split that would follow him forever. The private child searching for direction, and the public figure expected to deliver certainty. Even as a teenager, he sensed that identity could be fragile, and that the fastest way to protect it was to appear confident at all times. The turning point came when his parents sent him to the United States, hoping distance would calm the chaos. Instead, the move exposed a new battlefield. In America, he faced racial barriers, cultural isolation, and the quiet humiliation of being underestimated. He was talented, but opportunity did not come easily. Here, fighting transformed from impulse into intention. Training became structured, study became obsession. He began to ask not just how to fight, but why. The body was no longer enough. The mind had to lead. This is where the foundation of his philosophy took shape. He rejected rigid traditions and questioned authority, searching for efficiency, freedom, and truth in movement. Every limitation, physical or social, became a problem to solve. Yet beneath this intellectual awakening was a pressure few noticed, the need to prove himself in every room, not once, but constantly. Each success raised the bar. Each doubt fueled longer hours, harder sessions, fewer pauses. By the time he returned to the public eye with a clearer vision, the boy who fought to survive had become a man who fought to define himself. The world would later call this confidence. The case file calls it something else, a coping mechanism forged in uncertainty. Because when your early life teaches you that stillness invites danger, slowing down never feels safe. And that belief, quiet, powerful, and rarely questioned, set the stage for everything that followed. The transformation did not happen overnight. It happened in layers, through rejection, recalibration, and relentless self-belief. When Bruce Lee first stepped into the Western entertainment industry, he did not fit the mold. His face, his accent, his intensity, none of it matched what Hollywood expected from a leading man. Doors closed quietly, roles were minimized, credit was diluted. But something else opened instead, a resolve to stop asking for permission. Out of that friction came innovation. Bruce Lee did not merely adapt to the system, he re-engineered himself beyond it. He fused disciplines, stripped away ritual, and pursued efficiency with near-scientific precision. What emerged was not just a fighting style, but a philosophy: movement without excess, strength without stiffness, expression without apology. This was the birth of Jeet Kune Do, and with it, a new kind of authority. Earned, not granted. Recognition arrived when he returned to Hong Kong. There, the camera finally treated him as the center of gravity. Films exploded across Asia, and the myth took shape in real time. On screen, he was not simply winning fights, he was redefining masculinity, presence, and control. Each movement felt intentional, each pause carried meaning. Audiences didn't just watch, they leaned forward. For the first time, an Asian lead commanded global attention with confidence rather than caricature. Then came the moment that sealed everything. With Enter the Dragon, the reach expanded beyond borders, languages, and cultures. Bruce Lee was no longer a star, he was a symbol. Posters traveled faster than interviews, clips spread faster than explanations. To millions, he represented discipline, clarity, and an almost supernatural mastery of the body. The myth became self-sustaining, fed by repetition and awe. But here is where the case file slows the footage. Because myths are built on compression, they reduce complexity into icons. The more invincible Bruce Lee appeared on screen, the less space there was for weakness off-screen. Success amplified expectations. Expectations hardened into routine. Routine became obligation, and obligation erased rest. The world saw control, the body carried the cost. Behind the scenes, the pace intensified. Training sessions extended, rehearsals stacked, ideas multiplied. He wrote, choreographed, philosophized, and refined, often at the same time. This wasn't vanity, it was stewardship. He believed excellence required total commitment, and he believed slowing down meant losing ground. The irony is sharp. The very discipline that created the myth also narrowed the margin for recovery. By the peak of his rise, Bruce Lee had achieved what few ever do: complete authorship over his image. Yet authorship can become isolation. When you are responsible for everything, you are supported by no one. The myth had reached full volume, the human voice behind it was growing quieter. And that silence matters, because it leads directly into the pressure cooker that followed. At the height of his power, the schedule stopped being a tool and became a test. Training sessions bled into rehearsals. Rehearsals overlapped with writing. Writing continued late into the night. For Bruce Lee, this wasn't excess, it was responsibility. He believed excellence demanded total involvement, and total involvement left no room for hesitation. Rest felt like surrender. Slowing down felt like betrayal. To the work, to the image, to the discipline that had carried him this far. The body began to signal its limits, quietly at first. Fatigue was reframed as focus. Pain was interpreted as progress. Minor incidents were absorbed into routine, not recorded as warnings. When you are known for control, admitting vulnerability feels like erasing the very thing people admire. The myth told the world he was beyond limits. The human reality lived inside those limits every day. This is where the case file draws a careful line. Fact, there were moments of collapse and medical concern in the months before his death, reported recurring headaches, physical exhaustion, and extreme workloads. Unknown, how much of this was communicated, acknowledged, or truly understood at the time. The danger of perfection is not that it demands effort, it's that it normalizes warning signs until they blend into the background. Psychological pressure compounded the physical strain. Bruce Lee was no longer just performing, he was representing. For many, he symbolized strength, pride, and a break from stereotypes that had persisted for generations. That symbolic weight is invisible, but it is heavy. Carry it long enough and it reshapes decision-making. You push through. You don't pause. You assume the body will follow the mind, because it always has. Behind closed doors, the pace accelerated rather than eased. New projects, higher stakes, tighter timelines. Each success raised expectations, and expectations demanded maintenance. This is the quiet trap of mastery. When you reach the top, you feel compelled to defend it at all costs. Recovery becomes optional. Silence becomes the default response to discomfort. The public image remained flawless. Interviews were sharp, appearances confident, performances precise. From the outside, there was no crisis. Only momentum. That is what makes this chapter so important. Pressure rarely announces itself with spectacle. It accumulates in repetition, in nights without sleep, in days without pause. It thrives where discipline is praised and limits are dismissed. By the time the schedule turned from demanding to relentless, the margin for error had vanished. The body, once treated as an instrument of expression, was now a system under constant load. Something had to give. The only question was when. And when the clock finally shifted, from routine to countdown, it did so without drama, no alarms, no headlines, just a quiet transition from control to vulnerability that almost no one noticed until it was too late.
The final chapter does not unfold like a spectacle. There is no dramatic build-up, no cinematic warning. Instead, it moves with the quiet efficiency of routine, meetings, conversations, small decisions that felt ordinary at the time. In the last days of Bruce Lee, the pace remained fast, the expectations unchanged. To those around him, he looked focused. To the timeline, the margin for recovery was gone. 72 hours. Work continued. Discussions about upcoming projects filled the schedule. Ideas were exchanged. Plans refined. Reports later noted persistent headaches and physical discomfort, but nothing that stopped the momentum. This is how pressure hides, inside normalcy. When pain becomes familiar, it loses urgency. The body adapts until it can't. 24 hours. The day compressed. Rest was suggested. Medication was taken to manage symptoms. The intention was simple: recover quickly and continue. There was no sense of finality, only the belief that this pause would be temporary. For someone conditioned to push through, stopping completely rarely feels necessary. The system had always restarted before. Why would this time be different? T0. Silence. He collapsed and did not regain consciousness. No witnesses to interpret the moment. No final words to frame the narrative. The transition from effort to stillness happened without drama. Later examinations would attempt to explain the cause in medical terms, but explanations do not restore context. They do not show the accumulated strain, the nights without rest, the pressure normalized over years. News spread quickly. Shock replaced certainty. Fans searched for meaning, and speculation rushed in to fill the void left by unanswered questions. But the case file slows this moment deliberately. Sensation obscures understanding. What matters here is not a single factor, but convergence. The collision of physical strain, relentless pace, and a belief system that equated endurance with strength. The world reacted in fragments, tributes, headlines, confusion.
a sense that something essential had been interrupted mid-sentence. The myth demanded an extraordinary ending. Reality delivered a quiet one. That contrast unsettled people more than drama ever could. How does someone so controlled lose control so completely? Medical conclusions provided closure on paper. Emotionally, the story remained open. Because when the countdown is invisible, it feels unfair. Yet invisibility does not mean absence. The warning signs existed. They were simply absorbed into routine, reframed as discipline, and ignored by a culture that rewards pushing past limits. The final days were not defined by a single mistake. They were defined by consistency, doing what had always worked, even when the cost had changed. And that is what makes this ending so difficult to accept. Not because it was sudden, but because in hindsight, it was preventable. The countdown ended quietly. The impact did not.
When the noise faded, what remained was not mystery. It was influence. Bruce Lee did not leave behind a closed chapter. He left a framework. His films still move with urgency. His philosophy still challenges rigidity. And his presence still forces a question that refuses to age. What does real strength look like when the spotlight is gone? The myth survives because the ideas survived. Across martial arts, cinema, and culture, his impact is measurable. Training methods changed. Representation shifted. Efficiency replaced ornament. He taught generations to strip away what is unnecessary, not only in combat but in thought. Yet the legacy is incomplete without the human lesson embedded inside it. Mastery of the body does not grant immunity from its limits. Discipline without listening becomes risk. This is where Legacy After Dark pauses, not to judge, but to learn. Bruce Lee showed the world how to move freely, but the timeline reminds us that freedom also requires rest. Silence is not weakness. Asking for help is not surrender. The cost of perfection is often paid in private, long before it appears in public. The final image is not a punch frozen in time. It is a mirror. One that asks whether our admiration for relentless drive blinds us to warning signs, whether we celebrate endurance more than balance, whether we mistake control for safety. His life ends quietly. His influence does not. And the lesson he leaves is not about fighting harder, but about knowing when to stop. That is the legacy beyond the fist.